Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle, where professionals in the field educate, inform and inspire the community to live a more balanced and healthier lifestyle they love. Our first guest today is naturopath, respiratory specialist and published author Julia Rudakova, and she will be talking with us about children's respiratory health. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today.
So what are some of the common children's respiratory health issues?
Well, I see a lot of children in my practice, and most often parents bring their kids with tonsillitis, recurrent coughs, and of course asthma. Asthma is one of the top conditions that I see children for. And what is asthma? Asthma is constriction of airways, really. And the body, when it does that in response to a trigger, it can be an emotional trigger, it can be a chemical trigger, can be viral. There is a physical activity-induced asthma. And when that happens, body starts producing mucus as well to safeguard itself, to expel the trigger and to moisten the airways. So it's a very, very natural response of the body. There is no pathology is that. When that happens, it's the body doing its work, protecting itself. Although it seems and sounds and looks terrible to observe your child struggling to breathe. Another common respiratory condition that I see in kids is anything to do with tonsils, adenoids. So they are lymphatic tissues that are located at the back of the throat in the nasal passage, and they are immune tissues. They're lymphatic immune tissues, and it's not uncommon for young children to go through that because their immune system is maturing, and that's quite normal if it becomes a pattern. And if they get recurrent tonsillitis and enlarged adenoid to the point of not being able to breathe for months on end, then we have an issue and we need to address that. But from my perspective, the thing is that even when all the tissues are cut out, all adenoids gone, tonsils are out, what happens, what I observe is that they still breathe through the mouth. They can still snore. They may have initial adjustment and parents are happy and there is an improvement, but then they go back to the pattern, to the original pattern of mouth breathing, and that's not helping their dental health, their emotional health. Children wake up tired, and that's the worst thing, because children by their nature are very energetic. They have so much energy. They need energy to grow, to develop, to grow bones, to multiply cells, and for the brain to develop. And when they lose that, it sets them back. So it comes down to retraining the receptors in the brain, and that's where we use the Buteyko technique.
So can you explain to us what is the Buteyko technique? How does it work?
So it was developed by the late Dr. Buteyko many decades ago, and originally it was used for cardiovascular disease, but then it was trialed for asthma and respiratory disease because it is to do with your lungs and bronchi. And what it does, it teaches the body, again, reteaches, the body has to relearn how to breathe in a more functional way. What does that mean, to breathe in a more functional way? So there is a certain breathing rate that we aim at, and it's about 6 to 8 breaths per minute. So 6 to 10 maximum breaths per minute is our optimal range, right? So it's a slow breathing. It's gentle, so when you sit next to someone, you ideally shouldn't be able to hear them breathe, right? Sometimes it's very audible, our breath. Yeah, you sit to a person at the table in a cafe or at a function and you can hear them breathe. So that's not something that we call functional. The next one is how we breathe. Do we use the nose or the mouth? Right. So with the mouth, if you look at the hole here and here, mouth is much bigger. So we lose more important gases such as carbon dioxide, which is the driver to breathing, not oxygen. So Buteyko technique, what it does, it teaches us to go back to the original blueprint of the healthy breathing. The rate, what organs we use, what muscles we use to breathe, so the diaphragm instead of the chest, nose instead of the mouth, and proper breathing rate, and how we breathe, gentle or forceful. So that's in a nutshell what we do with the functional breathing retraining.
So what would be your advice to parents with kids who have respiratory health issues?
My advice would be to go back to the fundamentals and address their breathing patterns. It's super important, as I said before, to optimize the results of their treatment. And they can start with observing their child's breathing, and when they notice that the lips are slightly open, even if there is no audible breathing through the mouth, but the lips are slightly open, it means that the child is losing certain chemistry. And what they can do, I always say, they can say, close your mouth, but it becomes repetitive and annoying. So what I always say, just find a word like a giraffe and have this game with a child. When you say the word giraffe, it means that they need to close the lips and close the mouth, and that pushes the body to breathe through the nose. So re-establish nasal breathing at all costs is my tip. And of course, we need to go and seek help of a professional naturopathic practitioner or any medical practitioner and get a proper assessment and a proper plan.
Thank you so much for your time, Julia. If you'd like to know more about children's respiratory health issues and Julia, you can visit her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. Stick around, because after the break, we'll be back with another guest and another interesting topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, health coach Denise Mokadsi will be discussing the smartest workout for your body type and how you can have the fastest fitness results with less effort. Welcome back. Our second guest is health coach Denise Mokadsi. Will be discussing the smartest workouts for your body type and how to have the best results with the least amount of effort. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you.
Denise, when it comes to fitness, is more exercise always better?
Sounds like it should be, doesn't it? Like if something's good, let's just do more of it and it'll be better. But that's actually not always true. And our genes have a big part of that. What we do and our genes together, that combination is referred to as epigenetics. And so when we look at what we're doing with our lifestyle and how it influences our genes, then we can make really smart decisions about what we might do, for example, with exercise. So for some people, exercising more might be better if they're not doing much. But if someone's already doing quite a lot, more exercise is going to be harmful. It's all really about stress management, and we can definitely look at someone's body type through epigenetics. We can test for that. We can do measures on how they actually look, which gives us really important information, really interesting information, like the size of someone's muscle and the density of it. And how they respond, whether they've got a lot of fast muscle twitch fibres or slow muscle twitch fibres, makes them more predisposed to particular exercises or workouts. So one will be more suited to sprints, for example. So the fast muscle twitch fibre, they're very good sprinters, whereas the slow twitch muscle fibre are more the endurance kind of bodies. We also can look at whether someone is more of a strength trainer and they get good results building muscle by lifting weights, whereas someone else that might take a lot of work to get a similar result because their body type or their genetics don't suit building muscle, for example. We can look even deeper about the genes and see whether someone has got certain genes that allows them to recover particular ways, or how their body uses adrenaline. And again, really, it's all just how do we manage stress, because exercise is a stress. And this is why exercising more is not always exactly the answer, because it introduces more stress into a body.
Is it true understanding your genetics and your exact body type can help you design smarter and more effective workouts overall?
For the sort of a similar reason. So if we know someone's got a lot of genetics, that means that they're going to be a better sprinter. It's better for that person to do more sprint work. It's also about what their goals are. So if they were wanting to build muscle and have a strength program, they could still do it, but it's quite helpful for the trainer to know that their body is more suited to sprint work, and just to give the client realistic expectations that they can still build muscle. But if you think of a weightlifter, they look very different to a marathon runner. You can see the different body types are suited to one particular exercise more than the other. But often we find that people who have a certain goal around something will pick that goal because they know their body that suits their body. Like a marathon runner type body is probably not going to be someone that wants to be a weightlifter. They're going to they like doing more the sprint work. It feels better for them. And so people can work it out through trial and error. But it's nice to have some genetic testing done to know, oh, okay, I'm going to need more recovery, or my body responds better to one type of exercise than another.
Denise, how do you test for this?
We can look at the DNA sequence and the effect of lifestyle on the sequence to look for these epigenetic markers or variations. And sometimes that can involve a blood test or a urine test or stool or a swab, cheek swab. We're really just looking to see where can we get the genetic information to see what's going on with the genes. We can also do less invasive testing that doesn't require a blood sample, for example. It would be body measurements. You know, we can just look at the different dimensions and proportions of body type, and that will also give us a diagnosis, like the relationship between someone's wrist size and length, or how thick their neck is, or how thick and how long a neck is. In relation to the other measurements, you can kind of see it. Like a shorter person with a thicker neck is more likely to be like a strength or a bodybuilder compared to someone with a long, lean neck who's more like a sprinter.
What practical ways could our viewers start making their exercise routines work better for their body types?
Testing is always good because everyone is so different. You can start noticing how you feel. Like if you're doing certain exercise, just see if sprint work feels good for you, or if lifting heavier weights starts to feel good for you, or your body responds well. That can be a good way to tell what's going on for you. It can be tricky though. Sometimes you might see someone else getting a really good response from heaps of interval work that they're doing. So you might think, oh, I'm going to do that too. But maybe that doesn't suit you. And so it puts more stress on your body and you're not getting the results. It might work, but it's just a bit of a guesswork. It's trial and error. Other things people can do is really to notice how well they're recovering after a particular type of exercise. So if they're doing a lot of sprint work and the next day they feel really great and they recover quite well from it, it's probably an exercise that's suiting their body. Whereas if they're just dragging their feet and they feel terrible or feel injured, it's probably not something that suits their body. So just noticing that, like tracking all of that. And I think taking enough recovery time. Lots of people, like you said at the start, isn't more better. We think it is, but actually we get stronger when we're not training, like when we're sleeping and when we're recovering. So it's important to put in enough recovery sessions. So that might help someone realise, oh, that might be a better way for them to get results because now they're giving their body more time to recover. So, that would be another thing that I'd get people to sort of look at. And speak to a professional, like exercise professional, or get a DNA test to see exactly what's going on for your biology. That's probably the best way to know for sure.
Thanks for such important information, Denise.
Thank you.
If you'd like to know more about Denise and the best workout for your body type, please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we have another interesting guest with another interesting topic. Stay tuned. After the break, trauma therapist and author Melissa Hiemann will be talking about how trauma shows up in our parenting. Welcome back. Our last guest, Melissa Hiemann, is a trauma therapist and author, and the topic we'll be discussing today is how trauma affects our parenting. Welcome, Melissa.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming. So, Melissa, how does trauma affect our parenting?
Yes, so firstly, I'll explain what trauma is. So trauma and in relation to parenting is usually ages 0 to 7, where we have a very strong emotional response where we feel very scared or very stressed out, but we don't have someone safe there with us to help us process that, or we feel like we're trapped and that energy can't move through our body and it gets stuck in our body, and it can cause behaviours, negative thoughts and flashbacks later in life. It can definitely affect our relationship in regards to that we have with our kids, our relationship with parenting, our relationship with another parent, you know, if we have a partner, because we're taught certain ways of how to be nurturing, we're taught certain ways of how to discipline a child, and we've received it in certain ways. And so that can impact what we do with our children, right? So for example, with me, my mum was left at a boarding school when she was 4 years old. And so she didn't have a lot of nurturing there. And so when she came to having me, it was really about, you know, in that generation, the food is on the table, roof over your head, and there wasn't much emotional support, and she would never sit down and play with me. And so for me personally, as a parent, I forgive her, and I understand that that's just the way that she was brought up. But then when it came to actually playing with my child, I actually found it very difficult, and that nurturing and playful side didn't come out naturally, and I had to really work on that because I was neglected in that way. So that can be one example. Another example is, say someone is very strict as a parent and they believe that hitting or that kind of discipline is good, even though they might be alcoholics because they have anxiety all the time and they're always worried about getting in trouble. Even as an adult, they're just like, well, that's the way I was parented, this is how I'm going to parent my kids. And that strictness, the child and the parent lose their bond and their connection and trust. And the kid just learns that I only get attention maybe when I'm doing something naughty, and that can really perpetuate the behaviour, and that could be generational. Then when that child becomes a parent, they could believe that the discipline in that way is the right thing to do. And then you can go on the other spectrum where a parent is just very carefree, the child is free range and let to do whatever they want to do. There's no structure, there's no guidance. As a parent should be a guide and a safe connection for that child. And then they might feel like a little bit lost, and they don't fit in anywhere, and they're not connecting with anyone. So there's like a real spectrum there of how trauma can affect us, and how the way we were parented can affect how we parent our children.
That makes a lot of sense. How do we be aware of our own personal trauma when we're parenting?
So if you're a parent, you might know how triggering parenting can be. So for example, if your child is having a tantrum, right, and maybe growing up you weren't allowed to cry, you were told to shut up if you cried. So when that trauma is trapped in your body, you couldn't process those emotions, and those stress hormones are trapped in your body. Now, when your child is having a tantrum and screaming, it's triggering that part of you that wasn't allowed to express itself, and you want to quickly shut down that child because it's so uncomfortable in your body because that trauma is being triggered by your child. So instead of telling the child to shut up and stop crying, we can become a bit more self-aware and think, this is feeling very uncomfortable for me, and just getting curious about that and being there for your child and being really present rather than being really stuck in how you're feeling and perpetuating that generational trauma that could happen if generation after generation they were told, like, shut up, don't cry. So parenting really starts before we become a parent. I know that it starts way back to the partner that you choose, you know, and the partner that you choose is going to have such a significant impact on your nervous system, on your stress levels, on how peaceful you feel, and how conducive that is to having a really nurturing and safe space to bring a child into. So it really starts with, am I attracting the right partner or going for the right partners that are conducive to having a really trauma-aware, conscious parenting environment, a peaceful environment to bring a child into? And then as when you become pregnant, and then at about 3 or 4 months old in the womb, the nervous system of the baby and the child is already scanning the mother's nervous system and the environment to see what they're going to come out into. And trauma can already start there. So even for myself, when I was in the womb, I would have been scanning and seeing, what is my father like? What is the household like? What am I coming into? Oh, my mum feels very alone and unsupported, and I could take that trauma on while I'm growing in her belly. So that's when it can start. And then ages 0 to 7, a child's body, even if they don't consciously remember, remembers every single thing. So when you let your baby cry it out, when you hit a toddler, when these things happen, when a child is watching domestic violence or watching fighting, they're literally absorbing every single thing that is going on and what happens to them or what doesn't happen to them when they're not protected and abuse happens. And that's their blueprint for how they are going to be as an adult. And most of our personality is created ages 0 to 7. So the more traumas that there are, and there's a study called the ACE study where if there's violence in the house, alcoholism, abuse, neglect, the more likely someone is to have obesity issues or health issues, addictions, and issues in their own relationship.
What advice would you have for parents out there to repair their own relationships with their children?
Yeah, so when we explain all of this information, they become aware it can bring up a lot of guilt and shame of perhaps how we've caused our children trauma. But the great news is there's neuroplasticity, which means that we can heal our relationship with our children. You know, we can say sorry to our children, even if we thought we were doing the best that we could, which we definitely were. And we can start to repair that bond that we have by creating positive events, creating positive memories, holding space for our children's emotions, holding space for our own emotions firstly so we can hold space for others. So we can start to break the generational cycles and the perpetuating traumas that are getting passed down in our DNA, in our environment, in our families. It's never too late. And the first step is, you know, working with someone yourself and releasing that guilt, that shame, and healing your traumas, and you will naturally evolve and be able to heal that relationship with your child.
Thanks, Melissa. That's such valuable information. If you'd like to know more about Melissa Hiemann and how trauma shows up in our parenting, go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And that's all for us for today. We'll say bye-bye until next time. If you'd like to know more about our show, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.